السيدة زينب بكبرى ووازم الصلوات.
سورة المباركة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، شفيع المذنبين وخاتم النبيين، نبينا وشفينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا بالقاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فإليك يا رب نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا رب مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لدعائي وبلغني منايا، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاؤه المقى. يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهل. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد، وهو أصدق الصادقين وقوله الحق. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآله. Respected scholars, elders of the community, my brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبا عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. We started yesterday to talk about the importance and the lessons that we can derive from the life of the fourth Imam, and the fact that these days of majalis, as we culminate to the day of Arba'in, are not only really the majalis of Ashra Zainabiya, but they are also the majalis of Ashra Sajjadiyya. And we started yesterday a little bit briefly to talk about the state of Imam and what Imam had to face after the events of Karbala, and what lessons we can derive from the Imam as we look at his life from the time of the events of Karbala leading up until the time of his martyrdom or his death. No Imam, of course, began his Imamat then in the way, the tragic atmosphere that the fourth Imam began his Imamat. He began his Imamat when his whole family had been slaughtered on the plains of Karbala. He began his Imamat when not only were his family killed and martyred in the burning fields of Karbala, but also the women folk were made captive, and their tents were burnt, and their hijabs and their chadars and their veils were snatched away from their heads. It was in this sort of a environment that Imam alayhi salam began his imamate. And we know that from there he went to Kufa and he was in the darbar of Ibn Ziyad, which we talked about a little bit yesterday. And then he went into the darbar of Yazid, and we talked about that a little bit yesterday as well. And he spent some time in the darbar, in the jail, and the zindan of Sham, where he was made captive and he was separated from the women folk. Understandably, if you can see, look at the history of the events after Karbala, the tragedy of Karbala had created a chaos in the Shia world. There was confusion in the Shia world and there was chaos. The khutbat of Janab Zainab salamullahi alayha and Imam Sajjad salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi in Sham especially were so powerful that it had created a revolution within the hearts of the people. But there was chaos at that time. People were confused. They didn't realize what was going on. On the one hand, they had this ideology that was promulgated by the Banu Umayyah that we talked about yesterday, the ideology of Jabr, that said that you have to accept the condition that you're in because those who are vested in authority and obedience to those who are vested in authority is like obedience to God. On the other hand, they realized the fact that the martyrdom, the fact that that Yazid was responsible for the killing of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, the grandson of the Holy Prophet, was something that was quite dramatic for them, and it was quite telling for them that what is going on. So they were in a level of confusion at that time. There was then a movement that started, and the movement that started was that now that Imam Hussein alayhi salam had been martyred, this is the movement from within the Shias, that now that the Imam Hussein alayhi salam was martyred, who is the next Imam? There was a confusion. Who is the next Imam? Because Imam Hussein was martyred in the fields of Karbala. Imam Zain-ul-Abideen was taken captive after that. So there was this confusion that now the martyrdom of Hussein has occurred. Who is the next Imam? And there was a group, a movement that started that believed that Muhammad Hanafiya, who is the son of Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, he was that this movement was taking Muhammad Hanafiya as the Imam after Imam al-Hussein. So there was this movement that started because the problem was, who is the next Imam? Now Imam Zain-ul-Abideen alayhi salam finds himself in a position where he has to clarify his own imamat. He has to clarify that he is the divinely appointed Imam. On the other hand, there is a movement that is looking at Muhammad Hanafiya as the rightful Imam. Within the Shias, the movement that Muhammad Hanafiya is the rightful Imam after Imam al-Hussein. And the theory behind that was that if Imam al-Hussein was the Imam after Imam al-Hassan, because Imam al-Hussein was the brother of Imam al-Hussein, then why can Muhammad Hanafiya not be the Imam after Imam al-Hussein, who is also the brother of Imam al-Hussein? So this is a situation that Imam Zain-ul-Abideen finds himself in. But the problem that Imam had was, how does he proclaim his imamat in an environment where he was closely being observed by Yazid? And he was closely being observed by the Banu Umayyah. Because one thing was for sure, Yazid did not want a repeat of Karbala. For Yazid, he would not have hesitated after the killing of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam to kill Imam Zain-ul-Abideen was something that would have been very easy for him. Why? Because Imam Zain-ul-Abideen alayhi salam was about 23 years old at that time. He was not well known. Imam Zain-ul-Abideen was not well known at that time. Imam Hussein, of course, was very well known. But Imam Zain-ul-Abideen was not very well known. So for him to kill Imam Zain-ul-Abideen, it would have been very easy to do something where he would have killed Imam Zain-ul-Abideen. And so Imam was quite aware of this. and the fact that his divine virtues were not very apparent in the Shia world. So how does Imam now go about proclaiming his imamate without actually making it very obvious to the Yazid, to the Banu Umayyah, and especially the Yazidites? Now, Imam himself saw three major issues in front of him that he had to tackle after the events of Karbala. The first one, of course, was how to announce his imamate publicly and do it without seemingly opposing the Banu Umayyah leadership. The second issue he had was because the Shia world was in chaos, the community was divided. There was a group that was talking about Muhammad Hanafiya, there was a group that was talking about somebody else, then there were people who were kind of not very clear on what's going on anyway, and the whole issue was that there appeared to be no guidance for the people. And the history says that the community was so divided that it was as if it was the beads of a tasbih, and that somebody had broken those beads and the community had been scattered. When the beads are broken of a tasbih, the beads just scatter, right? And it is described that was the state of the community at that time. So the second challenge that Imam had was, how do I bring this community together? How do I unite the community? How do I unite this community that has been scattered, not only with different ideologies, but different issues with respect to social issues, social problems, and the fact that they perceive that they do not have the guide? And the third most important challenge that Imam had was the fact that the community now was being bombarded by the Banu Umayyah with an ideology that was taking Islam in a very different direction. It was promulgating Islam to be a very different religion from what the truth was. So how does Imam now try and bring the faith back to the people, to the Ummah, to the truth of what Islam and the Deen really is? How does he satisfy the fact that there is a true Iman based on the teachings of the Quran and the Holy Prophet and the Ahlul-bayt? And how is it that he would be able to say to people to lead their lives so that they would be in proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So these were the challenges of the Imam. The Imam, therefore, these were huge tasks at that time after the events of Karbala. The first issue was how does he go about announcing his imamate? And today we are going to focus on that because there are lessons in the way he announces his imamate. The announcement of the imamate, the way the Imam figured this out, and look at the insight of this Imam. Look at the wisdom of this Imam. This is why I'm talking about this Imam, because I want to break that persona of that Imam that we always think that he's, just bimar and lachar and he didn't do anything. I want to break that persona. Look at how clever Imam is. And look at how insightful and full of wisdom he is, how wise he is. He has a proclamation of his announcement of his imamate. He does it in the form of a family feud. He realizes that there are people who believe in Muhammad Hanafiya as the imam. So he now decides with Muhammad Hanafiya that let's do something where people will understand that I am the rightful imam. So Muhammad Hanafiya now is asked to claim that he is the imam after his brother. So Muhammad Hanafiya now claims that after Hussein, I am the imam. And Imam Zain-ul-Abideen alayhi salam says to his uncle publicly that no, you're wrong. You are not the imam after Imam al-Hussein. I am the imam after Imam al-Hussein because I am divinely appointed. And the imamate is a divine appointment. So this is now becomes a family feud. A feud between uncle and nephew, arguing as to who is the imam. This feud means that Yazid now just takes a back seat and he says, "Bana jagra kare che, lokane jagra karwa de family ma." It's not my problem. It's just a family feud. Let them fight. You will just sit back and relax. So what does Imam Zain-ul-Abideen do? He says to Muhammad Hanafiya publicly, he says that let us ask Hajr Aswad. Hajr Aswad is the black stone of the Kaaba, right? He says, let us ask Hajr Aswad as to who the rightful Imam is. During Hajj, this year we will go to Hajj, and during Hajj we will ask Hajr Aswad to say who is the rightful Imam. Now this is amazing. I mean, you can imagine, right? So the people are hearing this, and Muhammad Hanafiya says, yes, no problem. We'll go to Hajj and we'll ask Hajr Aswad to give testimony as to who is the rightful Imam. So the people now are confused. They are wondering, how's this going to happen? Like, what's Hajr Aswad going to do? Hajr Aswad is a stone. It's a black stone. How is it going to actually give testimony as to who is the Imam? So people are wanting to say, they say, we better go to Hajj this year. And this year is going to be a really good year to go to Hajj. Because something is going to happen. There is a feud between uncle and nephew, and Zain-ul-Abideen is saying, let us ask Hajr Aswad to decide. So they said, we don't know what is going to happen, but we better be there. So this news spreads. And you see, this is the most brilliant media strategy that the Imam uses. And I'm using the words of today, of course, right? Because, of course, at that time, there was no Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, right? At that time, the best way to spread an information or news was to gather people in Hajj. Because in Hajj, everybody would come from different parts of the world, different parts of the Arabian world. They would all gather in Hajj, right? And then whatever happened in Hajj, they would then go back to their own cities and they would be able to tell the people this is what happened. So look at the cleverness of the Imam, that he uses Hajj as a media means to spread the knowledge of his Imamat, to spread the announcement and the proclamation of his Imamat. So what happens? Both of these parties agree. They go to the Makkah. The people are amazed. They all gather and they feel, now let us go and see what happens. And the history books say that this was one of those times in Hajj where there was maximum crowd, because people were wanting to find out what's going to happen. And what happens is, when it comes to the time of Hajj, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam and Muhammad Hanafiya, they both enter the Holy Kaaba. And they both enter the Holy Kaaba, and they enter and they go towards the black stone. They go towards the Hajr Aswad. And first, Muhammad Hanafiya talks to Hajr Aswad. And he says to Hajr Aswad that I want you to proclaim that I am the rightful Imam, I am the rightful Wasi after Hussein ibn Ali. And the stone keeps quiet. Nothing happens. No movement happens. The stone it's a stone. It's a black stone. Nothing happens. It doesn't say anything. When the stone doesn't say anything, Imam Zain-ul-Abideen alayhi salam says to Muhammad Hanafiya, he says, oh my uncle, had you been the Wasi and the Imam, it would certainly have answered you. The fact that it didn't answer you proves that you are not the Imam and the Wasi. So Muhammad Hanafiya says, hold on. Okay, it didn't answer me, no problem. Now you approach the stone and you ask it, right? At that time, Imam Zain-ul-Abideen alayhi salam, he says 2 rakat of prayers. He says 2 rakat of prayers, and he approaches Hajr Aswad. He approaches Hajr Aswad and he says to Hajr Aswad that I want you to declare who is the Imam after Hussein ibn Ali. And the history book says, the history books are clear on this. They say that there was a tremor in the stone of Hajr Aswad. There was a tremor in the black stone, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the stone speak in clear Arabic. And the Hajr Aswad, there was a tremor in Hajr Aswad, and a voice came out of Hajr Aswad. And Hajr Aswad says, by Allah, verily, Visaya and Imama after Hussein ibn Ali is for Zain-ul-Abideen, Ali ibn al-Hussein, son of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and Fatima bint Rasulullah. as soon as the stone testifies, and it says it in clear Arabic, Muhammad Hanafiya immediately accepts the verdict and declares his bayat and his allegiance to Imam Zain-ul-Abideen. The fact that Muhammad Hanafiya immediately does this means there was some planning. Because if Muhammad Hanafiya really wanted the imamate, he would have made some sort of an excuse. Now this particular incident is described in many history books. And I will give you some references because I don't want you to think that I made this up, right? It is in Al-Ihtijaj of Al-Tabarasi. It is in Al-Kafi of Al-Kulayni. It is in Basa'u Rudd al-Darajat. It is in Allamul Wara. It is in Manaqib ibn Shahrashub. It is in Biharul Anwar of Allama Majlisi. This is a very well-known incident that happened. When this Hajar Aswad started to speak, this dispute that happened, this family feud that had happened, this was the beginning of the end of the Qasaniya movement. The Qasaniya movement is that movement that wanted Muhammad Hanafiya as the Imam. This was the end of that movement. And when the people in Hajj, in so many people there saw the effect of this particular incident and the fact that Hajar Aswad spoke in clear Arabic, they went back after Hajj to their own cities and they started to narrate this particular incident. And as they started to narrate this particular incident, the Shias around the world realized that the next Imam after Hussein ibn Ali is none other than Imam Zain-ul-Abideen, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Now the questions that's in our minds, right? How can a stone speak? How can a stone speak? You see, it's very easy for us sometimes to make judgments. Some things we believe when it is convenient for us to believe. And when it is not convenient for us to believe, then we challenge it. So how can a black stone, yes, it is Hajar Aswad, yes, it has its own significance, but how can a stone speak? Speak in clear Arabic that has been recorded in history in so many books of history. How can a stone speak? And the stone can speak because it is min sha'airullah. It is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is min sha'airullah. Allah in the Quran says, we will come back to Hajar Aswad, but let us see what we learn from this incident of this proclamation of Imamate, where he makes the stone speak. You see, everything is doing the tasbih of Allah. Everything. This ayat of the Quran. Everything is doing the tasbih of the Allah. When the Holy Prophet holds a stone in his hand and it starts to recite the tasbih of Allah, it is not the quality of the stone. It is the quality of the hand that is picking up the stone. The stone is reciting. It is the Holy Prophet that lifts the veil between you and the stone so that you may be able to hear it. And the same is with Hajar Aswad. Why? Because it is min sha'airullah. In Surah Hajj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُؤَذِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran has spoken about certain signs that lead to the recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in so doing, He has emphasized that whomsoever remembers this sign, whomsoever recognizes these signs, whomsoever reveres these signs, وَمَنْ يُعَذِّمْ ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَذِّمْ, whomsoever reveres these signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives proof of piety. Proof of piety that's not superfluous or superficial. Taqwa al-qulub. True proofs of piety that is entrenched deeply in the heart. Taqwa al-qulub. This is when you recognize min sha'airullah. The piety that resides in the heart is much more entrenched than simply that piety which is superfluous or superficial. and whatever reminds you of Allah, and whatever refers you to Allah, whatever is ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is min sha'air Allah. And to remember or honor that thing stimulates the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without the intention of worship. Worship is only for Allah. Worship is not for anybody else. But whatever reminds you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, stimulates the remembrance of Allah, is described as piety entrenched in the heart, because it is min sha'air Allah. You know, when we used to, in the older days, you know, when we used to go to Hajj, right, we used to do Qurbani, you know, in Mina. And Bana, you remember the Qurbani in Mina. And we used to go and we had to choose the animal ourselves. We had to go and choose the animals. And what happened is you would go there and there would be some guy who would have all these sheep, and then you would say to him, okay, I want this one for Qurbani. And he would say, Bana, 2,000 dirham. And you would say, look at your sheep, it's so ugly, you know, I'll give you 1,000. And then you would negotiate with him. And you negotiated, and you would settle, let's say, for 1,500. And then you would take that Qurbani with you. What does Allah say about that Qurbani in Hajj? That animal in Hajj, the animal of slaughter in Hajj, cannot be compared to that animal that we slaughter, you know, at home, you know, for sadaqah or for aqiqah or to make pilau. That animal has a special quality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. Once you have chosen that animal, once you have made that deal, and now that animal is in your hands, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that now you have to respect it. Now you have to respect it. Why? Because it is min sha'air Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْبُدْنَا جَعَلْنَاهَا لَكُمْ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ. That animal is now superior to man. Why is it superior to man? Animals are inferior to man. But that animal of slaughter in Hajj is superior to a man. Why? Because it is min sha'air Allah. It is now ascribing you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is now ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah goes further. He says that even that rope that is around the neck of the animal, the rope through which you are pulling that animal, even that rope you cannot disrespect. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تهلوا الشعائر الله ولا الشهر الحرام ولا الحدي ولا القلائد. Qalaida is that garland, that rope that's around the neck. Even that you cannot disrespect. Why? Because it is min sha'air Allah. So what is the secret? Thousands of years ago, Hajra walks between Safa and Marwa. Hajra walks between Safa and Marwa. That running between Safa and Marwa of the wife of a prophet, who was not a Ma'soom, right? She was not a Ma'soom. She ran between Safa and Marwa, but the act that she carried out was for the survival of a prophet who was a Ma'soom. That act between running between Safa and Marwa was such an act that act Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made wajib even today as one of the ahkam of Hajj. Why? Inna Safa wal Marwatan min sha'air Allah. Because that Safa and Marwa is from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? It is from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the secret is that whatever is referred to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever reminds you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and leads you to the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, min sha'air Allah. And then Allah says, وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ, I want you to respect it. I want you to revere it. I want you to pay honor to it. I want you to recognize it. I want you to respect it because it is ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To respect and honor anything which stimulates the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without the intention of worship. That's very important. Without the intention of worship is described as taqwa al-qulub, piety of the heart. And we cannot look down upon these things that lead us to the nearness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by way of obedience. We cannot look down upon it because it is a proof of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, think about it. Adam was made up of clay, right? Am I right? Adam was created with clay and dust. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the angels to prostrate to Adam. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَائِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the people, to the angels, that when I have created Adam, right? When I have created a Khalifa on this earth, right? إِذَا سَوَّيْتُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِ. When I've put my soul into him, then what? فَسَجَدُوا. I want you to go into sajda. I want you to prostrate to it. The angels didn't argue. Immediately they prostrated to Adam. Immediately they prostrated to Adam. The only person that did not prostrate to Adam was Shaitan. Was Iblis, right? He did not prostrate to Adam. Why did Shaitan not prostrate to Adam? Because he did not have taqwa al-qulub. Shaitan did not prostrate to Adam, and he gives his argument for it. He says, قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. I cannot prostrate to him. I am better than him. He is made of clay. He is made of dust. And I am made of fire. I am made of fire. I am more superior. He is made of dust. He is inferior. Fire is better than clay. This, my friends, is the difference. The difference is in how you view it and what is your interpretation of it. The malaika bowed down because it was an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obeying Allah was worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The malaika knew that their prostration, their sajda to Adam was ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shaitan was looking at what it was made of. Iblis was looking at what it was made of. When you ask me, what is this alam made of? This alam is made of nothing. It's made of just a piece of wood and some cloth. But if you look at it that way, you are looking at it the way Shaitan looked at Adam. Don't look at what it is made of. Look at what is it ascribed to. If it is ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is min sha'air Allah. And if it is min sha'air Allah, we will always revere it and we will always respect it. This is the difference. The difference is in your interpretation of it. The difference is in how you view it. This mimbar is, what is it? It is just made of some planks of wood. That's it. But once this mimbar has been created and it becomes the mimbar of Rasul, becomes the shabih of the mimbar of Rasul, then wallah, those who know will sit on it. Monkeys will not sit on it. This is what the fourth Imam says to that khatib. You know, I told you that story yesterday about that khatib who Yazid asked to go and give, a lecture. When he ascended the pulpit at that time, you know what this fourth Imam called that pulpit? He said to the khatib, you are ascending on this thing, these pieces of wood. Because the person who ascends the mimbar gives it the min sha'air Allah. Don't look at what it is made of. Look at what it is ascribed to. if it is ascribed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then وَمَنْ يُعَذِّمْ, honor it and respect it. This azadari that we carry out, this is not a ceremonial lamentation. It's not a ceremonial lamentation. It has a purpose. And the purpose is related to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And it is through Imam Hussein alayhi salam that we get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remember one thing, the meaning of reverence, the meaning of ta'azim, when you do reverence and you respect, the alam or the lash or the tabut, that's just kissing it, that is not enough. That is not the meaning of ta'zim. The meaning of ta'zim and the truth of reverence is that when you go to that alam, when you kiss the alam of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or when you kiss the alam of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam, and you respect the zari of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, you are making a commitment to that thing. It is min sha'air Allah. You are now going to it and saying to it that I am kissing you with the intention that I will transform myself to such an extent that I will follow your teachings. That is ta'zim. That is the meaning of these things that we respect. It is not a question of just kissing it and just touching it. No, there is a commitment. There is a commitment to it that, oh Abul Fadl, I am kissing your alam. From now on, I am going to follow your way. Give me strength so that I may be able to follow your way. That is ta'zim. That is when transformation should come. Every beat of that matam, when you raise your hand and you bring it on your chest, every beat should transform your inner self to become a better person. That is azah. See, we focus on the form of azah. We are obsessed on the form of azah. Bana saf bana is not right. Saf, it looks like dancing. You see, the form of azah is determined by the indigenous cultures. You go today to Pakistan, the way they do azah is one person stands against another person. Safar, am I right? And they do azah, they encourage each other to do matam. You go to Iran, it is done in the form of a play. It is done in a form of a play. People actually, take up the roles of the various characters in Karbala, and that is how they do azah. You go to Dar es Salaam or Orlando or maybe New York, they do saf. Whatever it is, the form of azah will change. It will change depending on the indigenous culture. The essence of azah is the important thing. We have caught on to the form, we have lost the essence. And now what we do is we start to argue against it. We start to give, these philosophical exhortations. Philosophically, this is not right. This is not good. This is not right. We are teaching this. This looks like idol worshipping because you have not viewed it the way you should view it. You are looking at what it is made of. Look at what it is ascribed to. Don't look at it the way Shaitan looked at Adam. This azah is not a tradition. It is not a superstition. And this is not new. This is not new. You see, let's go back to Hajr Aswad. I started with the fourth Imam. I want to go back to the fourth Imam. Look at Hajr Aswad. This Hajr Aswad, this whole thing is not new. People wanted to remove the black stone from the Kaaba. They wanted to remove the Hajr Aswad from the Kaaba. They came to Amirul Mu'mineen, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, and they came to him and they said to him that why don't we remove this black stone? Because it looks like idol worshipping. People come, they touch it, they kiss it. It looks like idol worshipping. They came to Imam Ali. And Amirul Mu'mineen says, don't ever say this to me. Why? Because he said this Hajr Aswad is min sha'airullah. And then Imam says that it has qualities that you don't understand. And he says this Hajr Aswad, because it is min sha'airullah, he says when you come to Hajj, what do? You start your tawaf at? Hajr Aswad, and you look towards Hajr Aswad and you say Bismillahi Allahu Akbar, and you start your tawaf. And Amirul Mu'mineen says that when you come to Hajj and you look at Hajr Aswad and you say Bismillahi Allahu Akbar, the quality of min sha'airullah is Hajr Aswad registers your name. It becomes a witness that you have come and done Hajj. On the day of Qiyamah, it is this stone that will testify to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, he came and I saw him and I am a witness to it. And what is the other quality of of min sha'airullah? This is Amirul Mu'mineen, Hadith of Amirul Mu'mineen. Hadith of Amirul Mu'mineen is that the second quality of this Hajr Aswad, because it is min sha'airullah, is that when you kiss Hajr Aswad, Allahu Akbar. He says, when you kiss Hajr Aswad, it is able to distinguish the kiss of a believer from that of a munafiq. When you kiss the alam of Abu al-Fadl Abbas alayhi salam, it is able to distinguish if it is a kiss of a believer or if it is a kiss of a munafiq. It is the way you look at it. It is the way you look at it. It is your interpretation of it. We are now living in this society where everybody has an open license now. Open license to just start bashing Azadari. And these articles of Adha, we need to understand what it is. The quality of min sha'airullah is very different, my friends. Surah Yusuf. Surah Yusuf. Quran. Let's look at Quran, right? Because people say, Quran ma kya lake luch? Let's look at Quran, because I only presented Quran to you. Min sha'airullah was Quran, right? Look at Surah Yusuf. What does it say in Surah Yusuf? You see, the shirt of Yusuf, wallahi, the shirt of Yusuf, inshallah, you pray for me that I will be able to finish my book, inshallah, on Zulaykha. And it started in Orlando, that project of mine. And inshallah, the shirt of Yusuf is so significant that there is maybe 2 or 3 majlises just on the shirt of Yusuf. The shirt of Yusuf, right? Because this was the shirt first, that was taken by the brothers to Yaqub. They told him that, Yusuf has died. This was the same shirt that Zulaykha tore away, when she tried to seduce Yusuf. But look at what the Quran says. I want you to fast forward towards the end of the story of Yusuf. The Quran says about this shirt of Yusuf, it says, Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Quran says, أَذْهَبُوا بِقَمِيسِ هَذَا فَأَلْقُوهُ عَلَى وَجْهِ أَبِي يَعْتِي بَصِيرًا وَأَتُونِي بِأَهْلِكُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. Yusuf says to his brothers, right? He says to his brothers towards the end, when they find out that, yes, this is Yusuf, he was the king or the second in command, and they find out that it is Yusuf. Now Yusuf says to his brothers, he says, take this shirt of mine. Yusuf says, he gives them a shirt. And he says, take this shirt of mine and cast it on the face of my father. Take this shirt of mine and cast it on the face of my father. And what will happen? He will become clear-sighted. Because Yaqub had cried so much on Yusuf that because of the crying, the Quran says his eyes had become white. He had become blind because of the crying for Yusuf. Yusuf says to these brothers, take this shirt of mine, put it on the face of my father, and he will become clear-sighted. And when you do that, then you all come together and come and meet me. Bring your whole family together and come and meet me here in Egypt. Now I ask you a question. I said, Yusuf, man, it would be better you call them first. Call them, let them all come, and then you put your hand on your father and his sight will come back. Why you want to send a shirt? You want to send a shirt, and then you say, put the shirt on the face of my father. He has been blind so many years, but a couple of days here and there. Like you do it yourself with your own hands. Why you are taking this trouble? What does the Quran says? فَلَمَّا أَنَا جَاءَ الْبَشِيرُ الْقَاهَا عَلَى وَجْهِ فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. This is very important. فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. What does that mean? It means that when they came and they gave their glad tidings to their father, they cast the shirt of Yusuf over the face of Yaqub. And then what happened? فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. Immediately he became clear-sighted. Which means, if you look at the grammar of this, which means he was blind. He could not, otherwise it would not say فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا means that he was blind. He became clear-sighted. Why? Because the shirt of Yusuf was casted on the face of Yaqub. Why did this shirt of Yusuf do that? What power did the shirt of Yusuf have? It was not the shirt of Yusuf. The shirt of Yusuf is min sha'air Allah. It is one of the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We believe this, that the shirt of Yusuf can have a profound effect, that it would give the eyesight of Yaqub. But if we say to somebody, no, go to the zari of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, put your hand on the zari and maybe you will get shafanana. It's not right. This is like idol worshipping. That is like idol worshipping. Bapa, the zari of Abu Abdullah is min sha'air Allah. If the shirt of Yusuf can bring the eyesight of Yaqub, then the zari of Abu Abdullah can also do other things. And in my hearts of hearts, I believe, wallah, I believe that there are many reasons why the fourth Imam picked this Hajr Aswad to speak and give proclamation of his imamate. But I personally believe, and I have not read this in any book, this is my belief. I believe that one of the lessons that Imam wanted to give us was to remind us of the importance of min sha'air Allah. To remind us of the importance and the exalted status of the Ahlul-bayt. And we are losing the exalted status of the Ahlul-bayt. And it is because of this that we have not understood this fourth Imam. It is because of this that we have not understood, and we complain and complain and complain about all these different things about the religion, but we have not understood in looking at the essence of the religion. We look at the superficial parts of the religion, and then we have this license to make our own conclusions, but we haven't looked at the depth of this religion. And it is this Imam who suffered from his journey from Karbala to Kufa, and from Kufa to Sham. And it is said that every point in his journey, he was constantly whipped by the whips of Shimr Zil-Jawshan. Every point he was whipped and he was hit by Shimr bin Zil-Jawshan. Every point he suffered when the women folks were taken with him to the fields of Kufa and to the Darbar of Sham. And it is this Imam, history tells us that there are 3 Imams who really cried out loudly. There are 3 Imams who really cried out loudly when they were giving ghusl to somebody. 3 Imams. There are many Imams who cried. But to cry out loudly, uncontrollably, to shriek and cry out loudly, there were 3 Imams recorded in history who have done this. The first was Amirul Mu'mineen. It is said that when Amirul Mu'mineen was giving ghusl to Fatima al-Zahra, Imam cried out loudly at one point. He could not control himself. And when he was asked that, "Oh Amirul Mu'mineen, why is it that you cried out so loudly?" He said, "When I was giving ghusl to Fatima al-Zahra, I saw that broken rib which was inflicted upon her when the door of the house was broken down by the Muslims, and the door had fallen on Fatima al-Zahra, killing her baby Mohsin." The second Imam who cried out loudly and shrieked was Imam Zain-ul-Abideen. Sayyid al-Sabirin could not control himself. When did he cry out loudly? He cried out loudly when he was giving ghusl to Janab Ruqayya, to Janab Sakina. When he was giving ghusl to Janab Ruqayya, the women folk had come to Imam Sajjad and they had said to Imam Sajjad that we are not going to give ghusl to this 4-year-old girl. And Imam Sajjad said to them, "O women of Sham, why are you refusing to give ghusl to my sister?" And the women folk says that, "I think that your sister has some sort of a disease. We see some marks on her body and we don't want to take the risk of giving her ghusl." Imam starts to cry and he says to the women folk, "This is not a disease. These are the bruises that were inflicted upon her by Shimr. These are the bruises that were inflicted upon her when she fell down from the camel. These are the bruises inflicted upon her when she was chained and dragged between Kufa and Sham." But the historians say that when Imam then himself gave ghusl to Janab Ruqayya, when Imam gave ghusl to Janab Sakina, he shrieked out and he started to cry profusely. For when he saw the marks and the bruises on the body of Janab Sakina, he was not able to control himself. And the third Imam who cried out loudly was the fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir. And it is reported from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir himself. He says that when I gave ghusl to my father, I became very distressed. He says that I shrieked out, I cried loudly. He said, because after 35 to 40 years of the events of Karbala, when I gave ghusl to my father, I still saw the marks of the chains on which he was enwrapped. I still saw the marks on the body of my father. And I thought to myself that how painful it must have been for my father all these years, that even the marks are still in his body. It is for that reason that when Imam Sajjad came back to Medina and Muhammad Hanafiya came towards Imam Sajjad and the uncle wanted to hug the nephew, Imam Sajjad asked Muhammad Hanafiya, "Oh my uncle, do not hug me, for I cannot bear it. The whipping of Shimr has made me so bruised and wounded that the wounds are still raw and I am not able to bear." وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مِنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. We ask you, Allah, on these days of Ashra Zainabiya, we know there are many people from this community and from other communities who have been fortunate to go to the lands of paradise and do the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah al-Husseini in Arba'in. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that in the future that we may also have the sharaf to go and be able to do the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that those who have gone for ziyarah, that may you give them protection, safety and security, and may you have them return back to their own homes in a safe and secure way. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are many in this community who have many different kinds of problems. They may have problems with their jobs, they may have problems with their families, they may have problems with having illnesses, or they may have family members who have illnesses. We ask you with the wasila of the fourth Imam that, oh Allah, give them a full and quick recovery for their illnesses. Relieve the mu'mineen of all their problems and all their issues. We ask you, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in particularly those youngsters in our community who are now entering a very critical phase of their own lives, their secular lives, where they may be going through some examinations. There are some exams in universities and schools that are happening. We ask you, Allah, to give success to our youth. We ask you, Allah, to give them so much success that they become the beacons of light in our community. We ask you, Allah, so that they may be able to propagate the importance of the Ahlul-bayt, and they may be able to propagate the vision and the image of true Islam in this world. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to hasten the reappearance of our 12th Imam, Imam Sahib al-Zaman, Ajalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif, Matam Hussein. Ya Hussein.